The vehicle standing behind me is the 2025 Infiniti QX60, and it is Infiniti's best-selling three-row crossover. I reviewed one a few years ago and walked away extremely impressed with it. But now that it's been a few years and a lot of new competition has hit the market, is the Infiniti QX60 still one of the best three-row luxury crossovers you can buy? That's what we're going to answer in today's video. All right, so here we have the Infiniti QX60. Now, a little bit of a brief history lesson on this particular model. It came out back in 2013 as the Infiniti JX35, but in 2014, Infiniti decided to rename their entire lineup, and it was renamed to the QX60, and it's carried that nameplate for the last 10 years. Now, I reviewed a 2022 model year, which is the first year of the second generation, which is the one you're seeing on the screen today, and I thought they really made a major improvement in terms of exterior and interior styling. Now, the 2025 model year doesn't add too many changes aside from some different trims and accent pieces, but there's also a big change under the hood in terms of the powertrain. We'll touch on that more in just a minute. Now, the QX60 competes with the likes of the BMW X5, the Volvo XC90, the Audi Q7, and the list just keeps growing and growing. This is one of the hottest segments in the luxury space, and in today's video, we'll discuss whether this is still one of the best three-row luxury crossovers like I thought it was back in 2022. All right, to kick this video off, let's talk exterior styling. And honestly, I think that's one of this vehicle's biggest strengths. First off, the vehicle standing in front of me is the Luxe trim level. That's just one step above the entry-level Pure, so this definitely doesn't have all the bells and whistles you can get. However, this particular vehicle comes with the $1,900 Black Edition package, which is optional on the Luxe trim level. And as you can see, it blacks out a lot of the chrome that you find on the traditional QX60, so the grille surround is all blacked out. You also have this gloss black front grille, and then Infiniti calls this the waterfall effect, so you kind of have this cool pattern to the front grille that also ties into these little fake side vents that you have over here. And then down at the bottom, you've also got a pretty cool looking front splitter with your parking sensors and your radar-based cruise control. Now, in case you guys are wondering about the color here, there's only 3 colors available on the Black Edition that this one is optioned with. You can get this Harbor Gray color, which personally I think looks really good. It kind of is reminiscent of like a Nardo Gray from Audi or Destroyer Gray if you guys are a Mopar fan. You can also, of course, get black or white, but I personally prefer this color. But starting off with the headlights, as you can see, you get LED daytime running lamps and LED headlamps with automatic high beams. And as you can see, this LED light strip kind of goes into the grille. I really like Infiniti's new design language that they've kind of been integrating into a lot of their updated vehicles, including the new QX80 I recently reviewed. And honestly, I know looks are subjective, but I don't think very many people would call this vehicle unattractive. I think it's a pretty attractive looking exterior styling. Infiniti always does a good job with that. Now, as we come across the side of the vehicle, as you can see, you do have a little bit of gloss black plastic that wraps around the wheels. I wish this was body painted color, but it does kind of tie into that Harbor Gray exterior color. Let's talk about the wheels here. So they are blacked out as well, which is no surprise. These are 255/50 20-inch wheels, and these are wrapped around Hankook Dynapro HP2s. So definitely not something you would take off-roading, but these are just your regular all-season tires. Now, everything but the base trim level will come with 20-inch wheels. If you do choose the Pure trim, it's going to come with 18-inch wheels, which should ride a little bit softer, but they just don't look as good on the exterior. Coming across the side of the vehicle, this one being the Black Edition, this also has these blacked out mirror caps. You've also got a little bit more black trim. Personally, I would have preferred to have this all blacked out as well, even though I don't mind chrome. I think it would look really nice to have some black door handles and some more blacked out trim to give this vehicle a little bit more pop, since you're paying about $1,900 for this option. I also would have liked the two-tone roof that they offer on the highest autograph trim level, where the top is all blacked out. That would have been nice to add on to this Luxe trim level with that $1,900 package, but you do have these blacked out roof rails all across the top. And I do like how they make this kind of a floating D-pillar, which is just separated by those 2 chrome strips. It almost looks like the rear windshield kind of wraps around the back. And then I should mention, this one being the Black Edition, you also have some fun exterior night lighting, so it shines the Infiniti logo, and you also have some pretty bright lights here at the bottom. Now, as we make our way to the rear end of the vehicle, you have an integrated spoiler back there. And again, the LED tail lamps are really nice. My one little complaint here is I think this looks a little too similar to the Nissan Pathfinder, which of course shares its platform with the Infiniti QX60, since Nissan and Infiniti are the same brand. But it still looks really nice. I mean, I like how these LED strips kind of wrap around, almost coming to the center. It would be kind of cool to see a full LED tail light strip from driver to passenger side, but that may be for a future facelift or next generation. You also have the blacked out Infiniti logo back here, along with your QX60 badges. And then down here, you don't have any exhaust tips, even though it looks like it is. Your exhaust tips are actually kind of tucked in underneath, but it makes it look like your exhaust ports are kind of more sporty than they actually are. And then you of course have rear parking sensors as well. But I think exterior styling is definitely one of this vehicle's biggest selling attributes. I mean, this thing just turns heads, and there's not as many of them out there. And so of course, people are going to be paying a little bit more attention to this because it's just not very common. Now, in case you guys are wondering about the dimensions here, it's about 198.2 inches long, which is very similar to other mid-size three-row crossovers. You're talking about 69.7 inches tall, and you've only got about 6.7 inches of ground clearance, so definitely no off-roading in the QX60. All right, next up, let's jump under the hood and talk about the big change here for 2025, and that is the powertrain. You no longer can get the Infiniti QX60 with the 3.5-liter naturally aspirated V6, which is the same one that you can still get on the Nissan Pathfinder. Instead, Infiniti has opted for their VC turbocharged series of engines, which they've used on the Nissan Altima SR VC Turbo and on the Infiniti QX50. It's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that's actually down a bit on horsepower but up a bit on torque. We're talking 268 ponies and 286 pound-feet of torque. Now, we'll talk more about how it feels behind the wheel when we do the driving portion, but it leaves a little bit left to be desired. In terms of 0 to 60, Car and Driver tested this engine around 7.5 seconds, which according to them is also quite a bit slower than the prior powertrain. Now, in terms of fuel economy here, we're looking at 22 in the city, 27 on the highway for a combined 24. And regardless of whether you get this thing in all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, your combined fuel economy remains unchanged. The vehicle I'm reviewing today is the all-wheel drive version, and then if you opt for the top-of-the-line autograph trim, you're only going to get all-wheel drive. Now, the one saving grace here is they didn't take the entire powertrain from the QX50. I'm talking about the transmission here. This is a traditional torque converter 9-speed auto, the same one they have on the Pathfinder, and it works great. It's awesome that there's no CVT here. Now, in terms of towing capacity, it also surprisingly remains unchanged despite the smaller displacement. It's still 6,000 pounds. And then lastly, this vehicle has a curb weight of about 4,700 pounds. All right, next up, let's jump inside the Infiniti and show you some of the cool features. But first, I want to show you the updated Infiniti key. This is the same one I reviewed on the QX80, and finally, Infiniti has done away with the same key they used on Nissan. You still have your remote start, which is a welcome feature, lock, unlock, you have your power liftgate, and you have your panic button, and it's got Infiniti in script over here up at the top, and it feels really nice. It finally has kind of a little bit of weight to it. It's a little bit thicker. It says Infiniti on the back, so I like this updated key for 2025. Now, as we jump inside, keep in mind, this is the Luxe trim level, so again, it's pretty close to the entry-level trim. Now, in terms of the interior colors on the Luxe, there's really only two options. You can get this graphite leather with metallic weave, or you can get it with a light sandstone color with the same metallic weave interiors. Now, if you option for the autograph trim, which is the highest trim level, then you can get it with semi-aniline quilted leather, and you've got some different colors, including a dark brown. But starting off with the door panel here, this is a luxury vehicle, so as to be expected, a lot of things here are leather wrap, nice soft touch materials up at the top. You got some cool aluminum over here with your aluminum door handle, some contrast stitching. This is that metal weave that I talked about in terms of the trim level here, and it looks okay. It's got a little bit of texture to it. Honestly, I kind of would have preferred some open pore wood or even some gloss wood or something, because I think this looks a little bit on the cheaper side. I could see this on the pure trim level, but I think the Luxe should have a little bit of a better interior. You do have 2-person memory seats over here, along with more of that metallic weave. And then moving down below, you've got your automatic window controls. These are very similar to other Infiniti products I reviewed. They don't look straight out of a Nissan product anymore. This is soft touch material over here with some more contrast stitching. And then this particular vehicle comes with the 17-speaker Bose Performance audio system. I actually think it sounds really good. Now, if you choose the base trim level, you're only going to get a 9-speaker audio. So this, along with some other things I'm going to point out today, is one of the reasons why I honestly wouldn't recommend getting the pure trim level. I think you got to go for at least the Luxe or above, and the Bose audio is just one example of that. Now down here, this is hard touch plastic, unfortunately. You do have a really large storage compartment and a little water bottle slot, and then an extension of your Bose audio system. Now as we jump inside, you do have this illuminated kick plate over here. That's an accessory you can always buy. And then talking about these seats, these are what Infiniti and Nissan call zero gravity seats, and they are really comfortable. These are definitely on the bigger side because, well, this is kind of a big to mid-size crossover. I do like the design over here with your headrest. I do wish they had a little bit more contrast to them in terms of the stitching, but other than that, they're perfectly fine seats. These are 8-way power adjustable with 4-way lumbar support, and these are heated and ventilated on the Luxe trim level. If you choose the pure trim level, you're not going to get any type of ventilated feature, but at least heated seats are standard on every single trim level. Now, you also get 8-way power adjustable passenger seat on the Luxe trim. If you choose for the higher trim levels, including the Sensory or the Autograph, you're also going to get massaging seats. So that's a nice welcome feature if you really want to pamper yourself. Now, jumping on the inside, let's talk interior styling here. Not too much has changed since I reviewed it back in 2022, but I do want to point out some of the nice use of material. So again, you have this metallic weave, which isn't my favorite, but this is all soft touch material up here, up at the top. It's nice and leather wrapped. This is even softer over here. This is, actual leather. It's padded. You got some contrast stitching. Now, if you choose the Autograph trim level, you're also going to get a little bit of quilted leather over here, which is really nice. And then that metallic weave extends behind the infotainment screen. So overall, a nice interior. I just wish it had some more color pop. And unfortunately, if you choose the Luxe, you only get 2 color options, either light or dark. Now, talking about the steering wheel, it is leather wrapped. It's got flat bottom design, and it is heated on all trim levels. It is, of course, tilt and telescopic power operated. And then we'll touch on safety features here in just a minute, but on the right-hand side is how you're going to activate your adaptive cruise control with your lane centering technology. This does have Pro Pilot Assist 2.0. On the left-hand side is how you're going to control this large 12.3-inch all-digital gauge cluster display. So turning this vehicle on, you'll see this thing kind of come to life. This is 12.3 inches and it's standard on everything but the base trim level. Again, another reason why I personally wouldn't pick the pure trim. So if you do pick the pure, you're only going to have a 7-inch gauge cluster. And this is a really nice screen. There's not too much functionality here, but as you cycle through the various modes over here, you'll see your typical Nissan Infiniti controls. You got your settings, your home menu, you've got your driving history, tire pressure, of course. The navigation, I kind of wish it would do a full screen navigation, but I haven't been able to do that. And then your audio settings. Now, the nice thing here is if you click this little menu button, you can also change the meter view, and then it changes to a more traditional gauge cluster with this cool animation in between. So I like this screen a lot. I think this is one of Infiniti's best features here, and it just makes the interior look very futuristic. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about the steering wheel is you do have paddle shifters here on the left and the right-hand side, and this is kind of wrapped in this little aluminum piece, and then your center is a little bit of a harder touch leather wrap material with your Infiniti logo here in the center. I kind of wish they had the updated Infiniti logo on the 2025 model year, where this kind of goes into this waterfall effect here at the tip, but that's saved for the QX80 that I recently reviewed. Now, moving to the left of the steering wheel, you'll notice you have some gloss black around your air vents. This is to turn on your lane centering technology and to open up your power liftgate. Then, as you can see here, you got a bunch of dummy buttons here because it's reserved for the higher trim levels. One thing that I've noticed is missing on this Luxe trim level as compared to the Sensory that I recently reviewed a couple years ago is the fact that there's no ambient lighting from what I can see on this Luxe trim. I believe that is reserved for the higher trim levels, but you'd have a little bit of ambient lighting over here underneath this trim piece and in the second row as well. Now, it wasn't very bright. It's definitely not even close to what they offer on the QX80 or on any other competition, but it was nice to have a little bit of like a yellow orangish hue coming from that trim piece that I think this vehicle is lacking because this is only the Luxe trim. Now, jumping over to the center screen, this is a 12.3-inch infotainment screen, and this runs pretty much the same software that I've reviewed on a lot of Nissan and Infiniti products. And this was perfectly fine 2 years ago. In fact, it was great 2 years ago. But since then, Infiniti and Nissan has updated their software to a Google-based system that I reviewed in the Infiniti QX80. And in fact, the new Nissan Rogue has this Google-based system. And unfortunately, this QX60 still doesn't have that. It still has the same, widget-style infotainment screen that they had in the past. And it's fine. It's just not ahead of the curve here, especially when you look at the luxury segment and some of the the competition here, this is a little bit behind. You also don't have wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. It's wired connection only, whereas if this thing had the latest Google-based software, it would have wireless capabilities. Now, one thing to point out here that's kind of nice that Infiniti has included on a lot of their vehicles is the 360-degree camera. Now, the one downside here is you can only cycle through a couple different angles. Like, there's no type of 360 mode where you can swipe through the vehicle. There's no wide-angle front view like they have on the QX80. I just think they should have integrated a lot of what they updated in the new QX80 in this 2025 model year, and unfortunately, they just haven't yet. Now, this 360 camera is included on everything but the base trim level. I'm sure you're kind of starting to see a trend here. Another couple things to point out over here is you do have your audio menu with Sirius XM, AM, FM, Bluetooth, of course. And then you do have a little settings menu where you can, customize different things. And then you do have this kind of two-screen setup where you've got your audio controls and a lot of other stuff over here, and then your main screen over here. Now, one serious complaint I have here, because this doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, is the Maps feature. So the other day, I was trying to find a detour road that I could take to kind of avoid some traffic, and by the time it took me to swipe around the screen and load something, I was already stuck in traffic. I mean, it's a very outdated system, and it's fine to have an outdated system if you have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, but when it's a wired connection and you don't have a cable just sitting in your car, it's a little unfortunate, especially when you sit in some vehicles that don't offer CarPlay or Android Auto, and their Google-based map system is fantastic. Again, I think Infiniti is just a little bit behind here, and it pains me because they have the technology. They have it in the QX80. They just haven't rolled it out to all of their other vehicles. Now, moving down below the screen, you do have this vent control stack over here with some more gloss black plastic, and all of this is leather wrap material. It feels very premium, very nice. And then I do like this control stack over here. So you do have physical volume knobs. You also have physical climate control knobs over here, which feel really solid, feel very luxurious. But then this entire screen is all touch sensitive controls. It's honestly kind of a mix between touch sensitive and physical buttons, because when you click on something, you actually have to kind of click on it. And this vehicle has haptic feedback controls, so it will let you know if something's been activated. So it's not simply just a touchscreen. In fact, I can touch it and it's not going to do anything. I have to physically push it in order for it to recognize my inputs. And honestly, I kind of like that because it makes you feel like you're pushing a button here, but it eliminates buttons in general with essentially just one big button over here. You do have your heated steering wheel controls over here, your heated and ventilated seats, your climate control stack. You can control your rear seats because 3-zone climate control is standard on all trim levels. You got your hazards over here, and then your seek and track buttons over here on the top. Moving below that, you do get a wireless charging pad as standard on all trim levels, and you got some USB ports down there as well. And then this is all kind of lined in this aluminum material. You've got your engine start stop button. You got a variety of different drive modes from personal, sport, auto to eco. You got your gear selector over here, kind of on the sliding mechanism. And then down here are redundant controls that you can activate not only your camera, but your audio, your navigation. And then you can actually use this as a little mouse controller to navigate your infotainment screen. Over here, you got electronic parking brake, your auto hold feature. This is all wrapped in nice leather wrap material, soft touch arm console. Opening this up, it kind of slowly opens up to reveal kind of an odd shape over here. So you got different tiers. You also got a little compartment down there, and then a deeper compartment over here in the center with your cigarette style power outlet. Moving over to the passenger side, opening up this glove compartment, it is lined in felt material. And then up above you, this one just has a traditional rear view mirror. However, there is an optional feature on the Luxe trim where you can get a digital display for your rear view camera mirror, and you'll also get a 10.8-inch head-up display. Now, both of those can obviously be had on the higher trim levels, or they come standard on the Autograph trim. Now, moving up above that, you have your LED lighting. You also have this large panoramic moonroof that comes on all trim levels. It also opens up. Now, the opening is kind of small, but at least you have that dual functionality of having this large glass pane, and you also have an opening for some nice spring days. And then lastly, I should point out you've got a little sunglass holder up at the front. Now, before we move on to the second row, I do want to point out that since this one is the black edition, this headliner is all blacked out as well. So it does make the interior feel a little bit dark, especially if you choose the graphite interior. here. I still think the sandstone's probably the better color, but it's definitely gonna get dirtier a little bit easier because these are natural leather seats. This isn't a synthetic leather. Next up, let's jump into the second row. Now, one of the big advantages of a 3-row crossover like this is your door almost opens up 90 degrees to allow you to easily load car seats in and out, and for passengers to get in and out a lot easier. Now, starting off with the door panel, this is all soft touch material, and it's nice that you do have a manual adjustable sunshade or peasant blocker for your second row occupants. You do have some contrast stitching over here, more of that aluminum, and again, a little bit more of that texturized metal material. This is all soft touch, padded. You have your automatic window controls, your Bose speaker system, which also I should mention has like this concave design to it. So it's not just a flat speaker grill, kind of curves inward, and it looks pretty cool. I like how they did that. You also have another speaker over here, plenty of speakers in this vehicle, and 2 cup holders inside of the door panel. Now, jumping into these seats, these are really nice looking, similar to the first row. Even the headrest has this cool design to it. And then this vehicle can be had in either this 7-seat configuration, or you can get it with captain's chairs, which is the only option on the autograph trim, where this center seat is removed. But if you really want to pack the most amount of people in this vehicle, you're going to want to get this bench seat in the second row. Now, jumping back here, plenty of space, as you would expect from a mid-size crossover. Now, this seat actually is moved back a little bit because it has that easy entry and exit. But in terms of legroom here, Infiniti says you have about 37.7 inches of space behind this first row. And then this is your second row climate control settings. So not only can you adjust the fan speed and the positioning, you can also activate your heated second row seats. You also got USB ports located down here at the bottom, and a flat floor over here, which is kind of surprising because this vehicle does have all-wheel drive, so you can easily fit 3 occupants back here because it's a pretty wide vehicle. Now, in terms of headroom here, I'm about 5'9", and it's okay. I've got about 2 inches above me. I think this panoramic sunroof kind of eats into that. What I will say is this second row kind of has stadium seating, so I'm actually a little bit higher than the first row, which gives me kind of a nice, cool scenic view out the front. I also have a little leather-wrapped center arm console over here with 2 cup holders, and it's really nice padded. Lastly, this second row has this little grab handle over here where you can tilt it back a little bit. Obviously, that's going to eat into the third row passenger space, but it makes the second row a little bit more comfortable. All right, now getting into the third row of the Infiniti is really easy to do. They just have this button over here that releases the seat forward. And what's nice is it stays in this position, which means you can technically leave a car seat inside of the seat and not have to constantly remove it in order to access that third row. You can also do the same thing on the passenger side. Now, getting in is pretty easy to do. It's very similar to other mid-size crossovers. It's definitely not full-size territory, but climbing back here, it's not a terrible place to be, but it's definitely tighter than some of the competition. So first off, these seats, you got a pretty tall headrest over here, and they're pretty straight up. Now, you can pull this little handle and recline it, but that's going to eat into your cargo volume, but that's going to make these seats a little bit more comfortable. And they're kind of flat and low to the ground. And so when you're sitting back here, not only is your legroom kind of tight, Infiniti says you got 28 inches of space back here, but your knees are also really close to your chest. So as you can see here, my knees are pretty much at my chest, kind of in the fetal position, and they're also right up against the seat back. Now, obviously, this second row seat can move forward a little bit. It's on a rail system, and I think that's going to be necessary if you're going to fit people back here for a long period of time. Now, if you're a kid or maybe a young teenager, you're probably going to be okay back here, but as an adult, it's not very comfortable. But that's kind of par for the course for mid-size crossovers. If you really want more space back here, you got to go with full-size territory. Nice thing is you do have air vents up here, and you've got a window, so it doesn't feel super claustrophobic. But I will complain that this is all hard touch plastic over here where you have your cup holders, and I don't see any type of USB slot over here on the driver's side. You do have a USB slot over here on the passenger side. It's a traditional USB, not a USB Type-C. There's no center arm console, and then I should mention there's only seating for 2 individuals back here. So you do have this little plastic rubberized piece here in the center, and there's no middle belt buckle because this vehicle is a little bit narrower in the back, so you can't actually fit a third row occupant. Now, if you do need to fit 3 people back here, the Pathfinder offers that because the Pathfinder is a little bit wider in the back. Lastly, in terms of headroom, I've got about maybe an inch of space above me, maybe half an inch. So it's definitely not the best place for adults. Now, to get out is really really easy. You simply push on this button on the back of the seat and the entire seat moves forward. Now jumping into the trunk of the QX60, pushing this button, every single trim level comes with this power liftgate. However, if you want the hands-free system where you simply swipe your leg, that comes on the Sensory Edition and above. Now in terms of the cargo volume back here, it's about average. We're talking 14.5 cubic feet of space behind this third row. And the third row is really easy to fold down. You simply pull on this strap for the headrest to fall, then you pull on this little lever, and then the seat falls down. Now when you fold down the third row, you get 41.6 cubic feet of space behind the second row. That's a really large amount of space back here, definitely more than any regular compact crossover. Underneath here, you also have a pretty large storage bin where you can store some valuables, keep them out of plain sight. And as you can see, this thing kind of holds its position, so it's not constantly falling on you. Aside from that, you do have a little bit of grocery hooks over here on the left and the right hand side. And you've got some little tie down clips over here. So if you want to strap some cargo, you have the option for that, along with a cigarette style power outlet. No household power outlet here in the trunk area. Now you can of course fold down the second row seats as well, and if you do that, you get a whopping 75.4 cubic feet of space behind the first row. Now it's a little deceiving on camera, but this is pretty flat floor over here, so it looks like there's a little bit of a hump, and it does curve up a little bit like most crossovers, but there's no lip over here that you have to worry about when loading cargo. All right, next up, let's touch on the pricing. So the base pure trim level before the $1,350 destination price starts at $50,200. Stepping up to the Luxe trim level, it gets you up to $56,800. Then if you choose the Sensory, it's $59,100, and the top of the line autograph trim with the semi-aniline leather is a whopping $66,150. Now if you want all-wheel drive, that's going to be about a $2,000 premium on all trim levels except the autograph, which comes standard with it. Now this particular vehicle I'm reviewing today with the all-wheel drive, with the Blackout Edition, and with destination is just around $62,700. Next up, let's talk about the safety features. So every single QX60 will come with automatic emergency braking, you've got automatic high beams, rear cross traffic alert, rear parking sensors. You also get blind spot monitoring and lane departure warning. Now, if you step up to the Luxe trim level and above, you're also going to get traffic sign recognition. You're also going to get blind spot intervention, where it will actually nudge you back into the lane. You've got a 360-degree camera that I showed off earlier, lane departure prevention as well, which essentially means lane centering technology on the freeway, and you're going to get that adaptive cruise control. Again, another reason why you should probably pick the Luxe, because the driver's assistance features just jump up quite a bit higher when you upgrade from the pure trim level. You also get front parking sensors, and like I noted, you can get the optional digital rear view camera mirror. Now, one thing again that makes me kind of scratch my head a little bit is the fact that you don't get Nissan or Infiniti's Pro Pilot Assist 2.1 on this 2025 model year. What that is hands-free driving on select highways. That is pre-mapped highways that Infiniti and Nissan have kind of vetted through to make sure that you could do hands-free driving. This vehicle does not even have that option. Now the QX80 I recently reviewed does have that as an optional feature. Now that would be okay because the QX80 is the most top-of-the-line trim. However, that feature is also available on the Nissan Rogue in the Platinum trim level as an optional feature. So even the less expensive version of Infiniti's products do come with that as an optional feature, and yet you can't even get that on the Infiniti QX60. I just think they should have integrated that here for the 2025 model year. Now, in terms of warranty here, you get some of the best in the luxury segment. It's a 4-year, 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty, a 6-year, 70,000-mile powertrain warranty, and as of 2025, you get 3 years or up to 30,000 miles of prepaid maintenance from Infiniti, which can be used at any certified Infiniti dealership. All right, to finish off this video, let's talk about how it feels behind the wheel and my overall thoughts on the QX60. Now, first off, we're going to be driving over some train tracks here, and I'll show you what it feels like behind the camera, you know, in regards to the ride quality here. So here we have some train tracks. And it handles it pretty fine. I mean, the ride quality here is perfectly normal. I can't say it's better than the competition. You know, Mercedes has some really great ride quality on some of its vehicles, but I can't say it's bad either. This is perfectly luxurious. It doesn't feel like a cheap car, and I think the sound insulation here is great as well. I've driven this vehicle quite a bit on the freeway, and it's a very quiet ride. There's really no issues with that. Driving over potholes, you're not going to get disturbed here. Now, I've heard people complaining about the 20-inch wheels being a little bit firmer. I just don't see it. I think it's perfectly fine. It's what you would expect from a luxury car. An example of the quietness of this cabin is there's a motorcyclist right next to me, and you can't really hear it that much on the inside. Like, I could probably still have a child sleeping in the back with this motorcyclist next to me. So the sound deadening here is pretty good. It's better than, you know, other Nissan products I reviewed, which is par for the course given the price point here. Now, in terms of the proportions here and the sizing, it takes a little bit getting used to. This is a little bit bigger of a vehicle than what I originally remembered when I reviewed this vehicle about 2.5 years ago. This feels like a pretty decent mid-size crossover. I mean, I compare this to like a Rivian R1S, and the R1S feels like it's a little bit narrower. This thing feels kind of wide. It feels pretty big. And in terms of how it handles and everything, this thing does not feel like a fine-tuned sporty car. It feels like a 3-row crossover with plenty of cargo volume on the inside, which is what you want if you're shopping for a 3-row crossover. You're not looking for something that can dart in and out of traffic. If you do, you probably don't need 3 rows, and then I would stick to the smaller version of this vehicle, which is the QX50. All right, we're actually about to get onto the freeway here, so I'm gonna put this vehicle into sport mode, and let's see how this thing accelerates. So we're gonna be going a little bit uphill here, so it's a little unfair, but here we are at 20 miles an hour. I'm gonna gun it to the floor. And we hit 70. So what are my impressions of this engine? It's good and bad. So when we're talking driving in city streets or passing power on the freeway, I think passing power is perfectly fine. It's probably just as good as a 3.5 liter V6. Where I notice this engine struggles a little bit is where I'm going from a dead stop to 30 miles per hour and trying to merge, you know, into a right lane when I see oncoming traffic and trying to do that very quickly. That's where the turbo lag here really gets to me. It frustrates me because it makes it feel like this vehicle is slow. But when you're up to speed and when the RPMs are, you know, 3,500 and you start gunning it, it's actually not slow at all. I think the transmission is probably a little bit slow to downshift, but luckily you can use the paddle shifters here, and then you can obviously downshift yourself. And the paddle shifters, they're okay. They're not super quick, but maybe a little bit quicker than simply waiting on the vehicle to decide itself. In terms of safety tech, when I turn on the Nissan ProPilot Assist, it gives me an indicator with green lights here on the dash, and it does a pretty good job staying centered in the lane. Of course, I do have to keep my hands on the steering wheel, but other than that, for daily driving purposes, I think it's great. So let's summarize my thoughts on this vehicle. Would I recommend this? Do I still find it as impressive as I did 2.5 years ago? And I think the answer is yes and no. There's some things I really like about this vehicle, and I think one of the biggest strengths is the exterior styling. This thing just looks really attractive. It looks sexy, and I don't think very many people are going to argue against that. Interior styling, the material quality here is fantastic. Everything is nice leather wrapped. The steering wheel feels really nice in the hands. You got pretty decent tech here with not only heated and ventilated seats and a heated steering wheel, but you got a wireless charging pad and really cool looking controls over here with the touch sensitive climate control stack. Where I think it lacks a little bit in technology is this infotainment screen. Although the size is great, the software here is lacking. There's no wireless CarPlay or Android Auto integration, and we're sitting here in 2025 where a Chevy Trax comes with that standard out of the gate. And what frustrates me here is Nissan and Infiniti have the technology to add wireless capability, but they just haven't on the QX60. Now, I know I've been comparing this to the QX80, which of course is a much more expensive older sibling, but if you even take a look at some of the Nissan products, they offer this technology. So I just don't get why Nissan is holding back on Infiniti despite it being the luxury brand for Nissan. The second thing I think is missing here is along the lines of technology, it's the self-driving tech that is again offered on the QX80 and even some Nissan products. I don't get why Nissan ProPilot Assist 2.1 with hands-free driving on select highways isn't offered on the QX60. And the last takeaway here is the powertrain. I don't really quite understand why they decided to go to the 2-liter VC turbo as opposed to keeping the 3.5-liter that they currently still offer on the 2025 Nissan Pathfinder. It would make more sense to me to have the Pathfinder go the 2-liter turbocharged route and keep this kind of the more naturally aspirated 3.5-liter V6, because this is the luxury brand. It almost seems like Nissan is holding out all the goodies within Nissan, and then whatever's left goes into the parts bin for Infiniti. I just feel like they should have made the Infiniti a better product. And the VC turbo is fine. I really don't mind this powertrain. In fact, I like it on the Infiniti QX50. I think it's actually a good powertrain for that size of vehicle. But when you're sitting at a gross vehicle weight of over 6,000 pounds when fully loaded, you got a 6,000 pound towing capacity, and you've got a 3-row crossover, I think this begs to have a more powerful powertrain, something that maybe will stand the test of time a little bit better. In fact, I think they should have always had a sportier or a red sport version of the QX60 because it's just begging for a more powerful version. And I think if they wanted to go the turbocharging route, they should have thrown their twin turbo 3-liter V6 that they offer on some other Infiniti products rather than cutting out 2 cylinders with this turbocharged 4. Now, for the common non-auto enthusiast person that just wants a luxury vehicle with a pretty peppy 2-liter 4-cylinder, yeah, this thing is perfectly fine. But if you're wanting to have a little bit more power, this thing is lacking a little bit as compared to the German competition, and its handling is a little bit more wallowy. It feels a little bit kind of more cushiony, more like a luxurious vehicle than a sporty vehicle, which is something you may want. But if you want BMW or Mercedes-like agility here, this vehicle doesn't have that. It feels a little bit more kind of top heavy. But that may also be one of this vehicle's strengths depending on what you're looking for in your luxury crossover. All of that being said, I still think the QX60 is a great luxury 3-row crossover. It not only looks great, it drives comfortable, the material quality in here is great, and in terms of pricing, this is going to be lower than a lot of the other competition, specifically from the German brands. It's also a little bit more unique. You're just not going to see as many QX60s out there as you are going to find, you know, any German car that you're going to see pretty much on every single corner. But what are your thoughts on the Infiniti QX60? Would you take this over BMW X5, Audi Q7? I mean, the list goes on. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos, everything from car reviews to automotive vlogs and how-tos. Also, check me out on all the social media, same as the channel name. And until next time, everybody, I hope you stay schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.